Welcome to Let's Talk About the Book. This is the series where we talk about books that challenge the way we think, the way we live, and the way we understand ourselves and the world around us. Today, we're talking about a book that has created a lot of conversation, a lot of debate, and for some people, a lot of discomfort. That book is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Now, this is one of those books people either love, dislike, misunderstand, or secretly read while pretending they don't. And I understand why. Because this book does not talk about power in a polite way. It does not dress human nature up in idealism. It does not pretend that every person you meet is operating with pure intentions. It pulls back the curtain and says, power exists, influence exists, manipulation exists, status games exist, hidden motives exist, social strategy exists. And whether you like those realities or not, they are still moving around you. That is why this book matters. Not because every law should be followed, not because every strategy should become part of your character, but because a man who refuses to understand power may find himself being controlled by people who do. The real value of the book. When I look at the 48 Laws of Power, I don't see it only as a book about gaining power. I see it as a book about recognizing power. That is an important distinction. There's a difference between becoming manipulative and becoming aware. A manipulative man reads this book and says, how can I use people? A wise man reads this book and says, how do people use power? And how do I protect myself from being naive? That is where the educational value of the book really lives. It teaches observation. It teaches you to pay attention to human behavior. It teaches you to notice who needs control, who seeks attention, who hides ambition behind politeness, who flatters to gain access, and who plays weakness as a strategy. Now that may sound cold, but life teaches men that not every room is safe just because people are smiling. And that is why this book can be useful. It gives language to things many men have experienced but may not have fully understood. The betrayal at work, the friend who quietly competes with you, the person who praises you in public but undermines you in private, the leader who uses loyalty as control, the relationship where affection becomes leverage. These things happen. And when a man does not understand the mechanics of power, he may call everything a misunderstanding. But sometimes it is not a misunderstanding. Sometimes it is strategy, power, and masculine awareness. From a masculine development standpoint, this book connects strongly to self-command. Because power is not only external, power begins inside the man. Can he control his ego? Can he manage his emotions? Can he stay quiet when speaking would weaken his position? Can he observe before reacting? Can he avoid being baited? Can he move with patience instead of desperation? That is where power becomes connected to frame. A man who has no frame is easy to provoke. He reacts too quickly. He explains too much. He reveals too much. He seeks approval too openly. He lets other people define the emotional temperature of the room. But a man with frame understands that not every situation requires an immediate response. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is pause, listen, watch, let people reveal themselves. That is not weakness, that is discipline. And in many ways, the 48 Laws of Power teaches the importance of controlling visibility, timing, speech, emotion, and perception. Those are not small lessons, those are life lessons. The danger of the book. Now, we also have to be honest. This book can be dangerous if it is read by a man without character. Because if a man is already bitter, insecure, power-hungry, or resentful, he may read this book as permission to manipulate. That is not wisdom. That is ego wearing strategy as a mask. Power without virtue becomes corruption. Power without empathy becomes cruelty. Power without discipline becomes abuse. Power without purpose becomes appetite. That is why I believe a man must bring his own moral framework into this book. You do not read the 48 Laws of Power as scripture. You read it as a map of human behavior. A map is not a command. A map simply shows you the terrain. And once you understand the terrain, you still have to decide what kind of man you are going to be while walking through it. That is the key. The book teaches power, but the reader must bring wisdom, why men should study power. Some men avoid the subject of power because they think it sounds negative. But power itself is not automatically evil. Power is the ability to act, the ability to influence, the ability to protect, the ability to choose, the ability to shape outcomes, the ability to not be easily controlled. A father needs power. A leader needs power. A husband needs power. A business owner needs power. A man trying to protect his peace needs power. The question is not whether power exists. The question is whether the man understands it, governs it, and uses it with restraint. That is where this book can become important. It can wake a man up. It can help him realize that innocence is not the same as goodness. A good man can be naive. A good man can be manipulated. A good man can be outmaneuvered. A good man can lose ground because he assumes everyone else is playing by the same moral code. That does not mean he should become immoral. It means he should become aware. That is the mature reading of this book. The book as a mirror. One of the most interesting things about the 48 Laws of Power is that it does not only expose other people, it also exposes the reader. As you read it, you may recognize people who have used power against you. But if you are honest, you may also recognize moments where you used power yourself. Maybe you wanted attention. Maybe you played the victim. Maybe you withheld information. Maybe you tried to control perception. Maybe you wanted to win more than you wanted to be truthful. That is uncomfortable, but it is useful. A powerful book does not only show you the world, it shows you yourself. And that is why this book belongs in a serious educational conversation. It forces the reader to ask, how do I handle power? How do I respond to power? Where am I vulnerable? Where am I too trusting? Where am I too reactive? Where am I tempted to manipulate? Where do I need more discipline? Those are important questions, especially for men who are trying to grow in frame, leadership, and self-command. How to read this book properly. I think the 48 Laws of Power should be read slowly and carefully, not as a manual for becoming ruthless, not as a weapon against people, not as a shortcut to dominance, but as a study of human behavior. Read it with a notebook. Read it with reflection. Read it and ask where you've seen these patterns in real life, at work, in relationships, in leadership, in politics, in family systems, in social groups, in yourself. That is how the book becomes valuable. It moves from being shocking to being useful. It helps you see patterns. And once you can see patterns, you can make better decisions. That is the real reason a man should read this book, not to become colder, but to become clearer. So as we close this episode of Let's Talk About the Book, I would say the 48 Laws of Power is not a book to be swallowed whole without discernment. It is a book to be studied, questioned, examined, and filtered through character. Because power is real, but so is responsibility. And the man who studies power without responsibility becomes dangerous. But the man who studies power with wisdom becomes harder to deceive, harder to control, and more capable of moving through the world with awareness. That is why this book continues to matter. It teaches us that the world is not always as polite as it pretends to be. It reminds us that people reveal themselves through patterns. And it challenges the reader to understand power without becoming consumed by it. This has been Let's Talk About the Book. Today we talked about the 48 Laws of Power, a book about strategy, influence, human behavior, and the hidden dynamics that shape social life. Until next time, keep reading, keep reflecting, and remember, the goal is not simply to gain power. The goal is to become wise enough to understand it.